That time of year has come again, the beginning of the CDL. A lot of people don't really care about competitive Call of Duty. A lot of people blame competitive Call of Duty for the state that COD is in nowadays. I say that those guys are morons. Right now, I want to sit down and predict how the first weekend of matches for the CDL is going to go with you guys. Let me know in the comments below if my predictions are faded, if they're spot on, if I'm talking on my ass, or if I'm spitting knowledge. Let me know. This won't be a long video. I'm not really going to go in depth because there's not a lot that we can go into in terms of stats besides of what happened in the recent preseason tournaments, which I think is like the Monster 75k and the Kaysan 50k, which even then the Kaysan one, there was only 4 teams invited. I think it was FaZe, Thieves, OpTic, and Gentlemates. But as you can see in the last 5 matches, first match that we got on Friday is Falcons versus OpTic. I'm going to be honest. I think this is a 3-0 by OpTic. Falcons, they don't really have a good track record. They only played 2 matches in the Monster 75k, and they weren't in the Kaysan tournament. And that Team War loss, that was to Doug Center Martin. And if you've been in competitive Call of Duty long enough, Doug is not the greatest player, but he's not a bad player. He knows how to win. But whenever you have a team with 3 Call of Duty World Champions, you would think that those 3 Call of Duty World Champions would at least be able to beat Doug Center Martin and a team full of former Wash pros and challenger players. So I'm really expecting an OpTic 3-0 here. Obviously, it's a green carpet all around, and the only team that could really beat them was Gentlemates. You're going to hear me refer back to, you know, who beat who a lot. So just please bear with me because there's not really a lot that we can go on besides like those 2 tournaments. Match 2 for Friday is going to be Carolina Ravens versus Boston Breach. Now, I don't exactly know how good these 2 teams are. But if we go look at the past 5 matches that they played in, Ravens have more reps than Boston. Boston only has 2 matches and they lost both of them, both the C9 and Vancouver. And Ravens, I mean, the only teams that they've really lost to is OpTic and Toronto, which I don't know too much about how they played against Toronto. I don't know if the maps were close or not, but we're going to be using Breaking Point as like kind of a basis for our predictions because I'm going to be putting these bets in on Prize Picks as well. Maybe I'll include that in future prediction videos, but I genuinely think Ravens, I wouldn't be surprised if this was a 3-1. I think that they, just because of just the amount of reps that they have, I think that Boston outside of scrims, because scrims in tournament play, you're in a very different mindset. In scrims, you're not really too upset about the loss, but also these players might not be as locked in as they would be in tournament play. So I do think this is going to be a Carolina, I would say a 3-1 victory. I don't see it being a 3-0. I think Boston can probably sneak a search in there, but yeah, I think Carolina wins this pretty easily. And then the biggest matchup for Friday, which we already saw this at the Kaysan 50k, is LAT versus FaZe Vegas. For those of you that don't know, BZ versus Simp. They were teammates ever since BO4, and now this is the first year that they split up. Let's go ahead and look at the past 5 matches. Obviously, LAT, they didn't have the greatest start to the preseason tournaments. Then again, the preseason doesn't really matter whenever we're going to week 1 of the CDL. I do think that LAT, they're going in with a little bit of, you know, a little bit of their chest, you know, puffed out a little bit more because they did beat FaZe. They beat them 3-1 at the Kaysan 50k. The only teams that have really been able to beat them is Texas, or OpTic Texas, and Paris Gentlemates. And then if we go to FaZe, the only team that they've been able to beat is Toronto, which is very concerning because I think that FaZe team is very good. I think they have a large amount of potential. I think 04 is a phenomenal player, and I think Abuza has a high skill ceiling that we'll probably see him develop throughout the rest of this year. Now, I would not be surprised if FaZe take LAT to Game 5, but I'm going to go ahead and be very safe and say that LAT probably win 3-1, 3-1, just like they did at the Kaysan 50k, but I wouldn't be surprised if it goes to a map 5. I think the only thing that LAT has to worry about is if Kenny doesn't have a slow start. If he can just keep up with everyone else and just let Hydra run around and go double, triple positive, I think that they'll be okay and that they'll be able to beat FaZe pretty easily. Moving on to Saturday, we have Toronto Koi versus Miami Heretics. Now, Miami, I think that camp is automatically compromised. They had a very rocky offseason in terms of trying to keep Real, and obviously, as you can see, it's just red carpet all across the board. Toronto has had way more tournament play reps. The only team that has really beat them, or teams I should say, is FaZe and Cloud9. And then, you know, Miami, the only team they were able to beat was TJ Halley and the boys at Barstool. So I would not be surprised if Toronto wins this 3-0. I think that Miami, I think that they'll end up being a spoiler this year, honestly. I think that they usually have that tendency. Like, they're not the worst team in the league, and by the end of the year, they end up being like a contender for top 4. So I wouldn't be surprised if we see that this time around. But I can't see Miami sneaking a win out of Toronto. So I think Toronto wins this 3-0, 100%. Second match for Saturday is Vancouver Surge versus Paris Gentlemates. We were already talking about it. Gentlemates, I don't think we did talk about it, but Gentlemates, they are probably the best team outside of OpTic. They beat OpTic not once but twice. They lost to them once in a very, very fun to watch best of 7 series, and then not only did they get their win back, but then they said fuck you and threw them out of the ring. Won 4-1 in grand finals at the Kaysan 50K. So that team, I think this team compared to Vancouver, because Vancouver doesn't have a bad roster. Obviously, they beat Toronto, they beat Boston, but they did lose to Omit, which, not to shit on Omit and Rafi, or Rafi, however you pronounce his name. I think it's pronounced Rafi. I apologize for that. But Rafi, if you're a pro team that's in a franchise league, you can't be losing to amateurs. No matter how good Omit and their brand and their process for getting players into the league, both CDL and Warzone, you can't be losing to a team that's outside of the CDL franchise circuit. So I think that this camp, I don't think they're compromised like Miami is, but I do think they have a lot of reps that they need to get going, especially after they went game 5 with Carolina. I think if you can't beat Carolina outright, then you're kind of sitting in like that top 8. We'll see how they develop, especially since they pretty much lost their whole roster. They lost 04 Abuza. They lost Neptune, who's on FaZe. They lost everyone, which, you know, not to shit on Legend, who's coming from Halo to go and play for Vancouver, but Halo and COD comp, it's a little bit different. I think that he'll adapt. I think that he'll be a good player by the end of the year, but I think that he's going to have a rough couple majors up until like Major 3 or Major 4, and then he might pop off at Champs. So I think Gentlemates wins this 3-0. I don't see Vancouver sneaking a map off of them. This is pretty clear cut and dry. And then the last match for Saturday is G2 versus Cloud9. Now, we've already gone over the stats. We can clearly see it right here. G2, I mean, again, we can only go off the 75K, but like right here, like the only team that has beat them is Gentlemates. I think that G2 is a top 4 team right now. They're playing out of their minds whenever you watch them. They're very fun to watch on the map. And then Cloud9, I think they have potential. I love Cloud9 outside of the CDL, and I think that recently Cloud9, I don't think they've really like put their all into developing a good coaching staff, or just a good, you know, a good amount of resources into getting the best players for the Cloud9 brand. But I mean, they took a map off of Gentlemates, which is tippable. It is tippable now that I'm thinking about it. And they've already went up against Minnesota. So they've already matched up before. They kind of already have an idea of how each other plays outside of scrims. We'll see how this pans out. I think this will be a 3-1 victory for G2. I would not be surprised if it goes to a map 5 though. I think Cloud9, they can be a potentially top 6 team, maybe even kind of graze like the door to top 4, but I think G2 wins this. I don't see it really being a blowout, but I don't see it being, you know, a nail biter. And then we go on to Sunday, first match of the day, Falcons versus LAT. I'm gonna be honest, this is Coughing Baby versus Hydrogen Bomb. On paper, you would think that, like, and we already talked about this, on paper you think that Falcons would, you know, be a good matchup against LAT, but just, it really just depends. Both these teams are in like a weird like vibe area, because Falcons, you have to worry about Xnid and you have to worry about Pred. I think those two are the ones that are most likely to have a bad game, or just a bad series in general on Falcons. I think Kismet and I think Celium, you know, they're going to have an average series no matter what. And then for LAT, you have to worry about Kenny. Hydra, you don't have to worry about, but Scrap also has a tendency to, you know, kind of slow down. I think he's very dependent on how good his teammates are playing. Not to say he's a bad player. He's a phenomenal player, but I think he thrives off of his teammates frying. So you need to have more than Paco going double positive. I do think LAT win this, but I think that Falcons, maybe they take a map off them. Maybe they take a search just because of Celium and Kismet being search and destroy demons. I think this is going to be a 3-1 win for LAT. Second match of the day is also a banger. We have Genomates versus FaZe. We've already talked about it before. Genomates, arguably best team in the game right now. FaZe, not the worst team, but I think this is a 3-1 win for Genomates. I don't see it going game 5 because Genomates just has they know how to play everything. Plus you have Dan Ghosty on that roster, who, dude, he's a nerd. I don't know if you guys, you know, I highly recommend you go and do your research on him, because this dude is so dedicated to his craft. He is a phenomenal player. He has a great knowledge for just all modes. Like, I think he has overload down to a science, and the only other team that has that down literally is OpTic. So I think this is a 3-1 win for Genomates. I want FaZe to do good, especially with the players on that roster, but Genomates are too good at this point. Maybe FaZe after, you know, the holidays, like after December and we're going into January, I think FaZe might be able to come up with a way to take them down, but I don't see that happening right now. So I'm gonna go with a 3-1 Genomates. And then we have one last banger for Sunday. We have OpTic Texas versus G2. We've already talked about it. OpTic, you can argue they're the best team in the game, and the only team that can really fuck with them is Genomates. G2, they are a potential top 4 team. They've only lost to one team, and that is Genomates. I think this goes to game 5. I genuinely think this goes game 5. I think this is most likely a 3-2 win for OpTic. I think that if you put it on paper, I think OpTic, just with how they lock in on tournaments, I think their tournament records, besides the Kaysan 50K, because they won the Monster Gaming 75K, I think that they're just going to be trading chips back and forth this year at worst, but at best, OpTic, you know, they want to win everything. But I think that they're going to be, you know, swapping wins with Genomates, you know, every now and then. I think it's going to be like OpTic and FaZe back in AW. So I think OpTic wins this 3-2, but this is all these matches minus the Falcon and FaZe match are going to be really good on Sunday. So we're going to be eating good on that day. And that will do for the predictions for week 1 of the CDL. The next matchups are December 12th on Friday. So we'll have a video going over all of those. And then we'll have a little bit more of a basis to see how these teams are playing. You won't just be looking at a Breaking Point webpage, which, by the way, shout out Breaking Point. They're phenomenal for the scene. They have all the stats. We'll get real nerdy with it once I figure out how to edit these. But I appreciate you guys watching this far. If you have, please leave a like if you enjoyed this video. If you agree with my predictions, leave a dislike and leave a comment if you don't, because I want to see how right or how wrong you are. Remember, there are no wrong opinions unless, you know, you're just a fucking idiot and you're just stupid. I don't know, my fault, bro. And also, if you feel like you enjoy these types of prediction videos, please consider subscribing. It really helps the channel grow, and it helps keep me motivated to keep making these types of videos, because this is a little bit outside my wheelhouse. I don't really talk about competitive COD on the channel, and I really like to, because this is like my whole thing. This has been my thing for like 10 years. But other than that, I'm gonna go ahead and let you guys go. By the time that you guys are watching this, I will be streaming season 1 of Black Ops 7. We'll probably be doing a lot more Warzone than MP, but if you want to come by and let me know what you think about my picks, talk some comp COD, just talk about regular COD, please feel free to drop by. The link will be in the description below. And now I'll go ahead and let you guys go. You guys have a good rest of your day or night, and I'll catch you guys in the next video. Later.